Hello and welcome to this episode of the Game Plan Podcast by College Baseball Advisors. I'm your host, Wayne Mazzoni. My background is 30 years as a college coach, 1992 to 2022. I'm a current college baseball advisor. For more information about what I do, visit collegebaseballadvisor.com. On today's episode, we had Chris Pollard, head baseball coach at University of Virginia. I think it's pretty clear to people in the baseball world, they know this guy's reputation, obviously from Duke and doing a tremendous job at Duke, Appalachian State before that, and then taking over at UVA. I love doing this podcast because it's great to talk to people and find out really how they became what they've become. You'll really learn on this episode what an absolutely awesome human being, very articulate, very organized, inspiring coach that Chris Pollard is. We had a really good conversation talking about a little bit about his sports background growing up, the recruiting process of getting him to Davidson, how he sort of fell into coaching a little bit by training for what he thought was spring training at Davidson after he was done as a player there. Then he coached getting into the Coastal Plains League when it was just in its first year. He talked about how Brett Baretti, the head coach at Columbia, was an inspiration to help him get into coaching. He then was a paid coach at Davidson before he went on to take over the program at Pfeiffer. Really did a tremendous job there, which obviously led to each additional job. But again, just an awesome guy, easily relatable, obviously knows his stuff baseball wise, and it was really enjoyable. An easy podcast to do just to talk to a really like-minded guy. So I hope you really enjoy this podcast with Chris Pollard. I would like to remind you that the podcast is made possible through the sponsorship of the Mohegan Sun Baseball Coaches Convention, which takes place every January. This year is January 15th to 17th, 2026, at the Mohegan Sun Casino, a tremendous venue. The convention center for the event is awesome, between the vendor space, the meeting space, the breakout rooms, and also the batting cage and the live infield they have. There's a coach's social. It's just an awesome event that's really for the people that go, they do not miss it. If you've never been, I highly advise you to really go up there and see this great space and also this great event. For more information on that, you could visit their website at baseballcoachesclinic.com. And without further delay, here's my conversation with head baseball coach from the University of Virginia, Chris Pollard. All right, Coach. Very excited to have you here, and I appreciate in a new job, as I'm sure there's a lot going on between the fall and a new team. So to take a little time to join me, I really appreciate. Looks like we're a couple of guys with some gray beards, so we probably have some stuff in common.
We definitely got gray beard in common, Wayne, that's for sure.
So I always kind of start off with this question. Obviously, I know you're a baseball guy growing up. When you were growing up, did you play other sports as a kid growing up? Like, what was your sports life like as a kid?
Yeah, cool question. So, I grew up about 45 minutes from Charlottesville. So a little bit of a homecoming for me. And I did. So initially, I played baseball, basketball, and then played soccer in the fall. In the eighth grade, transitioned to football. And so at that point, it became baseball, basketball, and football. And then at one point in high school, decided to stop playing football out of fear of injury at the point where I knew baseball was my future. So in my last 2 years of high school, ran cross country in the fall, basketball in the winter, baseball in the spring.
I guess at that point, as you said, you knew baseball was your path. Recruiting back when you went to school, you're a little younger than me. When I went to school was a completely different animal than today. So do you remember of the process of getting to Davidson?
I do very, very, very clearly. And you're exactly right. For us, it was so much different than it is now. There was no fall baseball. There was no travel baseball,
No.
Wayne. And so, for us growing up in a rural area of Central Virginia, the only way to sort of get on the radar of schools that you might be interested in was to go to camps, right? And so the summer between my junior and senior year of high school, I hand chose about three or four camps. So I went to the Best in Virginia camp here at the
Yeah,
University of Virginia.
I remember that one. Yep.
Yeah, you remember that?
I do. Yeah.
And then I went to a similar version of that same camp at Radford University, and then Also went to the pitcher catcher camp at the University of North Carolina. And at that camp, Dick Cook, baseball coach at Davidson, was one of the instructors. And it was just really fortunate that Coach Cook decided to recruit me out of that UNC pitcher catcher camp. And, the rest is history.
So, what do you remember, years later about your time as a player at Davidson?
I remember just learning the game so much from Dick Cook. I really just genuinely didn't know and understand the game coming out of high school. And he was, in addition to being a great human, he's such a good baseball man, and he taught us the game. But more than anything, and this is why I wound up in coaching,
Mm,
Coach Cook taught all of us the importance of work-life balance.
mm,
And I just remember how great he was at really incorporating his family into our program at Davidson.
mm.
His girls were little. They're now grown and have, and are starting their own families. But I can remember at the end of practices, Allison was a toddler, and she'd go running out and jump on Coach Cook's lap and ride around on the three-wheeler while he drug the infield.
Right.
And I just remember that really sticking with me and thinking that's how it's supposed to be, right? Like you've got to make sure that you're finding time for both. And so anytime I've had the opportunity to talk about Coach Cook and the impact that he's had on my life, one of the most important things I point to is just how he was such a great role model for all of us that played for him in striking that balance between, really working hard at your craft, but also making sure that you create time for your family.
I mean, was it at that point you did think you wanted to coach? I mean, obviously you played some indie ball after college. Were you first thinking at that point, I want to be a pro, or were you thinking, hey, I see maybe I'm not going to be a pro. Coaching is a possible route for me.
So I realized very quickly into my professional baseball career that I was not going to be a great player at the next level. That I didn't have a future. There's not a big market for 5'11" right-handers that throw 84 miles an hour, right? So, you know, I did have the experience of going and playing a year of independent league baseball. I did stumble into coaching somewhat by accident, Wayne.
Mm,
I returned to Davidson in the fall of 1996, thinking that I was, training for spring training the next year, right? I was coming out of that independent season, and I wanted to kind of really get in tip-top shape and then make a run at spring training that next spring. So I was working. The deal that I struck with Coach was, hey, you can use the facilities, you can throw, and you can throw your pins and do what you need to do, but you know what? You're gonna hit a fungo. You're gonna rake the mounds. You're gonna help with the pitchers as needed, and add value back to the program, which I was really blessed to be able to do that. And that fall, it became increasingly clear that that my phone wasn't ringing off the hook with invites to spring training.
right.
And opportunity presented itself to go coach in a brand new collegiate summer league called the Coastal Plain League. It was
Ah, brand new. Yep.
the first year of the Coastal Plain League, and I was offered an opportunity to go and be an assistant, a pitching coach in that league. And I actually, the first call that I took about it, I declined it. My roommate at the time, who was our other assistant at Davidson, is now a coaching legend in the Ivy League, Brett Beretti, right?
Oh my God. Wow. Yeah.
Brett and I played together in college at Davidson, and then we were on Coach Cook's staff together at Davidson. And I have so much respect for that man. And he gave me some tough love, Wayne. He said, "Hey, you may want to call that guy back and tell him you're taking that job." And I said, "What do you mean?" I'm going to spring training. He said, "Well, like you need to look in the mirror. You haven't gotten that call yet. You might want to take that job." And that tough love kind of nudged me to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, I think I'd like to try my hand as a pitching coach in the CPL." And that allowed for the opportunity at Davidson to morph into Not a full-time position, but a paid position, and then from there, just really started to grow my love of the coaching side of the industry.
At any point in that early time, did you go, maybe I want to do something else? Maybe I'll entertain a business job, finance? Like this is like, did you go through that, which many young coaches go through?
I've had that conversation with a lot of young coaches who start out in business and say, "Hey, I'm not cut out for this. I want to get in coaching," or start out in coaching and say, "Hey, there's not enough time to start a family. I'm going to get into, I'm going to get into the 9 to 5 world." For me, once I sort of dove into coaching, Wayne, I didn't really think about any other options.
Mm,
Probably should have, but I was young and just dove into it with both feet and was enjoying it and sort of never looked back. And the opportunity presented itself at Pfeiffer University at 24 years old and was wholly unprepared to be a head coach. If I look back now and say, man, you didn't even know what you didn't know,
right.
but was blessed to receive that opportunity and learned a lot over the years from making a whole bunch of mistakes.
So I'll say this. I've done a lot of coaches like yourself on this podcast, and I don't care when someone gets that first head coaching gig, they almost always say they weren't necessarily prepared for that. They knew how to coach baseball. That was the easy part.
That's
It was
right.
all the other stuff that they had to deal with that, I think even this week I spoke to a coach said, like, I just thought things ran themselves. Like now I get the head coaching job and realize like if I don't order the baseballs, like we don't have baseballs for practice. So obviously there's a learning curve to becoming a head coach. Did you, and clearly you did a heck of a job there. And each step of the way, you've done a great job of seemingly turning places around. So like what did you learn in that first job at Pfeiffer that helped you basically take this program and make it a really good one?
Yeah, I think the things that I learned over my 5 years there were number one, I needed to become a lot more organized.
Mm,
So I had a passion for coaching, I had a passion for the sport, I had a passion for working with players and helping them grow and get better. And I had a passion to compete, but I was woefully unorganized, didn't really understand process, thought it was just about outworking everybody, and learned over those 5 years sometimes it's better to work smart than work hard.
right.
And then the second piece that I learned over that 5 years, Wayne, is just the importance of delegating and empowering people around you to do their job and not trying to do everything yourself. And one of the things I've said each time that I've made a move, whether it was leaving Davidson to become the head coach at Pfeiffer University, leaving Pfeiffer for Appalachian State, leaving Appalachian State for Duke, and now Duke coming to UVA, you learn in that first year, like, hey, I'm not going to be able to do it the exact same way I did it before.
Right.
And adaptability. And I was reading about Nick Saban and one of the things that people point to about Saban's success is his adaptability, right? He seems like this kind of crusty old school guy, but when you really peel back that initial layer, he's a guy that's really been able to adapt to the ever-changing landscape of college athletics. I think adaptability is so important because, after my first year at Appalachian, I realized like, hey, if I don't make some changes, this isn't going to work. And I would say the same thing about the end of my first year at Duke. And I feel certain I'll probably have that same conversation with myself after year one at UVA. It's like, hey, you've got to adjust some things here for this to work.
I think what's interesting, I know I felt this in my coaching career, there's not really a formal development process of coaches. Like you go to Morgan Stanley, like they're going to tell you how to do your job. In coaching, yeah, sometimes you have a mentor like you had Coach Cook, but then you're taking over Pfeiffer at a young age. It's like no one's really coming around telling you how to do your job. Yes, you have an athletic director and some bosses, but maybe they don't know baseball as well. So there's a lot in this profession of kind of learning on the job and self-learning that maybe other professions don't seem to have.
I think it's so true, Wayne. And I think it's where you really, self awareness and the ability to be a lifelong learner is so important. And even 26 years into the job, I started doing this uh, probably close to 20 years ago, but I still to this day, I carry a notebook with me when we travel on the road in the spring, and when I see a program doing something, when I see a coach doing something, I go, "Hey, man, that's smart. That makes a lot of sense." I just write it down, and so that ability to look around and kind of be a lifelong learner, I think, is a really important part of coaching.
Yeah, totally agree. Yes. Yeah, I would back in my day, I would do the same thing, whether it was just if you don't, I think people like us, if you don't write it down, there's no way you're going to remember it. There's no way you're going to do anything about it. Talk about, App State. I've actually had relatives go there, but I've actually never been to campus. All I see about App State is the incredible pictures of that stadium. Was that new stadium during your time? Or did that come after you?
No, we built that. We
You
built
built that. Wow.
Jim and Betty Smith Stadium. Jim Smith made a transformative gift to Appalachian State. Charlie Cobb was our AD. He's now the AD at Georgia State. Tremendous man, tremendous friend. But the decision to build a new stadium at baseball was really a football decision, Wayne.
Interesting.
So Red Lackey Field, which was the old ballpark, was right beside the football stadium, right beside Kid Brewer Stadium. And the football team really wanted an indoor facility. And in Boone, North Carolina, you need an indoor
Yeah.
facility.
Yes.
And they wanted it to be as close to the football stadium as possible, which makes sense. And so we moved because football needed that space for their indoor building. And so we built Jim and Betty Smith Stadium on the top of Bodenheimer Mountain. It is, if you've ever been to Boone, they always talk about the elevation of Boone being 3,333 feet, right? Jim and Betty Smith Stadium actually sits at about 3,800 feet because it's one of the highest points in the town of Boone. And it's a gorgeous setting. And obviously, everybody, I think, at this point has seen the social media
Yes.
drone images of Jim and Betty Smith Stadium, but was fortunate to have a hand in the construction of that ballpark and coach a lot of great players over the years in that stadium.
So obviously you're doing a tremendous job there. Obviously, to get where you are, the way to do it is to be very good at what you're doing, in your current job. Um, the decision to go to Duke at that point, was it sort of the next logical step? I've been here, I've accomplished what I want. It's time for a new, different challenge.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, when I took the job at Appalachian in 2004, people said, "Well, you're crazy, Chris. Like, why would you leave Pfeiffer? You're winning. Appalachian State is a football school, and it's in a cold weather climate. You can't win there, right?" And so went in the door with a lot of people questioning if it was a good decision or not. And then as we started to win at Appalachian and the opportunity opened up at Duke, some of those same folks said, "Hey, you're crazy to leave Appalachian State for Duke. They
Right.
don't care about baseball. The facilities are bad. It's a basketball school." And I just saw opportunity at both places, right? I think when I took the job at Appalachian, the one thing I knew for sure is like, hey, kids that grow up in North Carolina, they love Appalachian State University.
Right.
It's a beautiful place. Football Saturdays there are really special. Like I'm pretty sure we're going to find some kids that want to come play baseball at Appalachian State. Well, I had that same feeling at Duke, right? It's like it's a world-class university.
Right.
And you're talking about one of the best degrees in the country, and it's ACC baseball. I'm pretty sure there are going to be some kids that want to come play baseball here, and so that in both cases, just felt like these are universities that you can recruit to, and certainly here at UVA, we have the best of both worlds, right? Because you have a world-class university, but you have a baseball program that's loaded with tradition, 7 trips to the College World Series in the last 15 years. We've got one of the most beautiful stadiums in college baseball, Disharoon Park. So it's like you have the advantage of being at a high academic institution. You have the advantages of being in the ACC, but you also have the tradition and the facilities to go along with those other selling points, and that's pretty special.
So obviously, running a really good program is two obvious buckets. One is you got to recruit and get good players, and number two, You got to develop them, and you got to set a culture and a tone to make players get the best out of players. From the recruiting standpoint, at all the places you've been, do you have any philosophy, any type of player you look for, anything that, or even the way you go about recruiting? Because obviously at these places you're getting good players. It's kind of an open-ended question, but what's to recruit? What's your style, if you will?
It's a great question. Fit matters so much. And, I think we would talk during my 13 years at Duke, like you would know within the first two phone conversations if it was a Duke kid or not, right? If
Interesting.
it was there. Um, so finding that player that fits the university, that fits the institution, is really important. And then the older I get and the more I do this, Wayne, I think that also listening in recruiting is as much listening as it is talking.
Mm.
And when we recruit now, one of the things that I really want to listen for is, does this player, does this student athlete exhibit some of the values that are important to our culture? Like, and we talk all the time about four things in our culture, Wayne. We talk about having a process over outcome mentality. We talk about being a servant leader. We talk about gratitude, and we talk about having a growth mindset. And so for us, like, we're listening as we talk to players. Do we hear a guy that really understands process? Do we hear in this guy a guy that wants to be a great teammate, or a guy that has gratitude, or a guy that does not fear failure? Or the other side of it is like, do you hear the opposite of that?
Mm.
Do you hear a guy that maybe comes across as a little bit selfish, or a guy that maybe comes across as entitled, or maybe a guy that comes across as fearing failure? And those become, big red flags, when it comes to making the decision as to whether or not a player is a fit for our organization.
It's interesting because I think anyone in college baseball, any baseball person, you could ask. When I was coaching, if I had a player on my team and a kid from his high school reached out and said he was interested in the college, I went right to that kid and said, can this kid play? What kind of kid he is? Right? These kids know baseball too, so I think it's fairly obvious to know this kid could run. He's got physicality. That's a heck of a swing. He's got good hands. He could throw strikes. He's got velo. He's got command. This extra stuff is really where it's at. It's not easy to get. It's not, and I think sometimes the high school coach might be the frontline person to talk to because,
There is no doubt.
yeah, right. So I guess I'd ask you that: is you and your staff, is that someone, are you trying to reach out to that high school coach to get more info on the kid?
Wayne, you have to. I still believe that the high school coach knows the player better than any other coach in the process. Certainly players today, they have a larger entourage of coaches and supporters around them. A lot of the players that we talk to, they have a travel ball coach. Maybe they have a personal hitting or pitching coach. A lot of them have an advisor. And so there's a bigger circle, which I feel for a lot of our players these days, Wayne, because when you have that bigger circle, you have more voices in your ear, right? But I will go to retirement saying that the high school coach who walks the halls with that young man really knows him better than anyone.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, I do that now. I do advising of kids, and I always say to a coach, "Hey, listen, I've evaluated this kid. I've watched him play games. I don't know him like his high school coach. Here's his
Yeah,
number, dude. Give him a call
yeah,
to
that's
find
right.
out the real scoop because I my reputation's on the line, and I don't know the kid as well, maybe as that high school coach." Back to now the side of getting the most out of the guys that you have. Obviously, you talked about the culture piece. Is there things that you do in the way you run your program, in the way you run your practices for that matter, that are maybe specific to Chris Pollard?
Yeah, well, I think absolutely. First, culture has to be something that you live on a day-to-day basis, and we talk about our culture virtually every day. We're talking about gratitude. We're talking about process. We're talking about uh, comfortable being uncomfortable. We're talking about being a great teammate. And so, part of your challenge is to set up your practice and training environment where you can incorporate those things, right? one of the things that I think is really important is that we create an environment of failure within our practices.
That's a great point.
I tell guys at our first team meeting of the fall, I say, look, um, if we don't create an environment where you struggle this fall, then we've done you a disservice. Like we have, you grow through failure, you grow through struggle. And so we've got to create an environment that's uncomfortable because that's how you're going to grow and get better. We've got to help guys learn how to develop their process. We have to be intentional about training for gratitude. We've got to stress the importance of being a great teammate and how that not only helps the people around you, but it helps you internally be
Totally.
a better version of yourself. And so yeah, we have to create that environment on a day-in-and-day basis. And the one thing that I think has changed with the transfer portal and the fluidity that exists now in college athletics is you have to really instill those values on a year-to-year basis.
Mm.
10 years ago, your upperclassmen taught those values to your underclassmen, and then in 3 years, 2 or 3 years, those underclassmen did the same. Now that process that would happen over 2 or 3 years has to happen every year.
Right.
And so we have to be really intentional about setting our culture within about a 5, 6 month period. So the fall is now, while it's an important time for development, it's also a really important time for establishing the foundation of our culture because if it's not set by January or February, you're not going to have that culture in place in the spring.
Yeah, you echoed something. I did one of these talks with Rob Vaughn from Alabama, and basically he said a lot about the same that guys need to fail and practice to make the game, because that's going to mirror the game. And I remember in my coaching days as a pitching guy, I got very frustrated throwing serve them up BP to guys who would jack balls to the fence and then strike out 3 times and pop out during a game. And so I said, hey, let's do some challenge BP around here.
No
Like
doubt.
I need a workout. First of all, I'm going to come after you with this BP, and they don't like it, but ultimately I think it pays off. And now, of course, there's machines in many ways you could do that, but you're right. You got to check. And Lord knows, watching these baseball playoffs, watching Snell and Yamamoto, like you want, like you're, and I don't want to speak for you, but you're at Virginia. The goal is to win a national championship. It's
Right.
not going to be easy. So all those little things and challenging guys has to be crucial. All right, a couple more things. I want to ask you a personal question. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I follow this, I think, online. Your son just committed. Is that correct?
Yeah, my youngest son, Brady, just committed to play baseball at Gardner-Webb University. We're thrilled for him. I have a ton of respect for Jim Chester and the program that he runs at Gardner-Webb. I've seen it up close. We've competed against those guys over the last several years while I was coaching at Duke. And so we are excited for Brady and his journey. My oldest son is in his sophomore year playing baseball for Matt Burdett at Kenyon College. And so I've been thrilled for those guys to be able to go out and kind of live their dream. And I never forced baseball on those guys, and I think at times in their growing up, even kind of steered them away from baseball to say, "Hey, are you sure? Are you sure this is you don't need to do this because I do this." And they both kind of found their way to the sport in different ways, but excited to see those guys live out their dreams.
And it's funny. I did not know your oldest son was at Kenyon. Burdett is a friend. He's just an assault of the earth human being,
That's a
and
great
not
way
to
to
mention a tremendous school, by the way, too.
No question. No
My son, I think I texted you. My son plays at Christopher Newport U D3 in
question.
Virginia. It is interesting going through recruiting as a dad. So here, like, was that? Did you get involved? Did you use, hey, could check out my son? Because obviously you want him to land in the right place. You could take one of the kids with you to UVA, and maybe they don't play because maybe they're not at that level yet. But so what was it like being a dad with the kids in the recruiting process?
Hi, it's such an awesome question, Wayne. It has given me greater empathy for what families go through in the process. And it's helped me become a better recruiter because I understand now, I feel it from the parent side. I think, and you could probably attest to this, right? I think doing this for so long as you and I have, you can be a little bit unemotional to the process, right? I mean, you're trying to fill your roster, you're trying to get the right guys, and you sort of lose sight of how emotionally challenging this can be for the family.
Great
I,
point.
I've told this story a bunch, but my oldest son, Thomas, was at a college prospect camp. And he was just having one of those baseball days. He was 0 for 3 with 3 Ks, really struggling at the plate. And I'm pretty quiet when my kids play. I watch, and I'm just a dad. I'm not a coach.
Yep.
And my wife looked over at me in the middle of that third at bat, and she said, "You know what? This is good for you." And I said, what do you mean this is good for me? She said, well, now you understand what all these families go through. And man, it was a great reset. And so it's really helped me. And probably like you, Wayne, like I've told people, and I understand this more from the family side, you care less about the baseball opportunity and more about like who are the people that my son is going to be around, right? I don't care how many at bats they wind up getting. I want them to have a great experience, but really, I want them to be around really good people where they can develop friendships and relationships that are gonna last a lifetime.
Yeah. And you said something that was really well said. Dealing with kids and parents in the recruiting process, the amount of stress and agony these people are in, and I try to almost like I'm really like a counselor, like
Yeah,
relax and breathe, set good habits, get really good, because when you get better, recruiting gets a whole lot easier. But I do empathize with them, because the first time a college coach saw Wayne Mazzoni play baseball, I was in college, right? So I went to Gettysburg, and there was no recruiting back then. So people are really too stressed out. I wish I could just tell everybody to just breathe and it's all going to work out. But I get it, just as I went through with my son, and you went through with your boys. Like it's not an easy process. It's never going to be. There's a lot of kids, a lot of teams, a lot of tournaments, a lot of camps. I always tell people, I don't think you realize how hard recruiting is from a coach's perspective. Yeah,
sure.
you have a great staff at UVA, but you know what? It's a big country. There's a lot of
Yeah.
kids all over the place, a million reach outs. Like it's a little overwhelming too to do recruiting from the coaches side,
Question.
you know?
Overwhelming on both sides, and that's why, having people like yourself that can help families navigate this is more important than ever. It's gotten harder, right?
It is, yes.
And
Yes.
especially in the last 4 years, it's never been harder than it is right now. And the reality is, with the new collective bargaining agreement on the horizon, and the chance that the draft is going to go from 20 to 12 or maybe even 10 rounds, and what the House settlement has done to rosters and contrition there. This is the hardest time that there's ever been for high school players, not even factoring in the portal and how that makes the process harder. And so you're right. There's a lot of stress involved in it, and it's, families need direction with it. It's
And you said something that really hit home too, and especially you seeing your son at Kenyon. Obviously, people that come to me, and any kid, not any, most want to play Division One. And I say, hey, listen, if you're good enough, that's great. But do you understand how hard it is to get an offer at a Kenyon, to get an offer at Amherst, to get an offer at Johns Hopkins? Are you? This is a very difficult process to do at any level. It doesn't matter.
And the other piece of it too, Wayne, is like wanting families and players to understand just how good the baseball is at those schools.
Totally.
You're talking about, these are hard offers to come by, but this is also a great, rewarding baseball environment.
Yeah, exactly. All right, my last question for you, and I really appreciate you giving the time here, is so Mohegan Sun Coaches Convention. I live in Connecticut. It's a place that not only sponsors the podcast, like I just love going up there talking baseball with people. So I kind of asked this to everyone. It's somewhat putting you on the spot, but not that much. But back when you were in high school, like what would you want to tell younger Chris Pollard as a ninth grader, 10th grader, 11th grader? Is there anything you wish you knew then that seems obvious now to would have helped your younger self or help the kids that are watching this?
Yeah, I've learned so much about the value of process over my time coaching, and I wish I understood it better as a player. The ability to really develop great routines,
Mm.
and what those routines do to set you up for long-term development, and understanding, like, I think sometimes guys hear the word routine and they think about a hitting drill, or they think about a certain number of ground balls, but I'm talking about things like how much sleep you're getting a
Yeah.
night, right? Your how you focus on your nutrition, hydration. Like I always tell guys, like you could have a great strength training program, you could have a great hitting coach and be doing all the right things. If you're getting 4 hours of sleep a night
Amen.
and you're putting a bunch of junk in your body, like you're throwing your money away. Like the foundation for your development is getting 8 to 9 hours of sleep a night, eating right, and really staying hydrated, and then that gives everything else a chance to work for you.
You know how I knew you would say that, Coach? Because we're both wearing a Whoop,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
right? I do. I wake up and I like that's in the morning. I check my sleep like that. You're absolutely right. It literally one bad night's sleep is enough to kind of to throw off just to throw off your performance and your just life in general. So
no
I couldn't agree with you anymore. But all right, Coach, thanks so much for joining me and taking time at the schedule. I wish you absolutely the best. If I am down in Newport News checking out my son, I might take a shot over to Charlottesville and check out the program if you don't
just
mind.
a couple hours drive. I'd love to have you come over and spend an afternoon with us, Wayne. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, Coach. I appreciate it.
Take care.
All right. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Game Plan Podcast. Today's episode, we had Chris Pollard, head baseball coach at University of Virginia. He's in his first year coming off a tremendously successful run at Duke, was at Appalachian State prior to that, Pfeiffer before, and then previously to that at Davidson, where he also played. Hopefully you really enjoyed that podcast and really get a flavor for what makes this person successful and makes him a great recruiter and makes the players want to play for this guy. I think it was evident by listening to this podcast. So thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to remind you that this podcast was made possible through the sponsorship of the World Baseball Coaches Convention. That's in its 23rd year. That takes place every January, this year, the 15th and 17th of 2026 at the Mohegan Sun Casino in Uncasville, Connecticut. If you go to their website, baseballcoachesclinic.com, you will see all of this year's presenters. Soon enough, they'll announce the schedule and also each topic. But the event is just awesome to go to, not only to learn from these great baseball people, but to access them and also the fellow, people that go to these events. I've always walked around this convention center and like see groups of 5 or 6 guys talking about bunt defense or recruiting or whatnot. So it's just a great environment for baseball and local in New England at a great venue. Again, this is your host, Wayne Mazzoni. For more information about what I do with recruiting, please visit collegebaseballadvisor.com. And we look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Thank you.